Aaron Gilchrest is on the ground in Phoenix.
Well, Ryan, the arena behind me holds about 20,000 people. We'll be watching to see how large the crowd is that gathers to hear Vice President Harris and her new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. This is a state where the campaign knows there is a diverse population. They will be trying to speak directly to young voters and to black voters and to Latino voters and also to independent voters. We know from some recent data that was published in Arizona that about a third of the registered voters here are independent voters. And so the vice president will have to put some effort into convincing them that her ticket is the one that they should be voting for. We talked to voters here who say that the big issues for them in Arizona are really the economy, those issues around lowering costs and increasing incomes here. They're also concerned about reproductive freedom. That's something that we know could potentially be on the ballot or is very likely to be on the ballot here in Arizona in November. And then there are also concerns around immigration and border security. But I think, as has been the case in other places, the economy has really risen to the top as an issue for independent voters here. I want you to hear what some voters told us about that topic.
The two big things with her right now are immigration and economy. And I know when you're borderline in a recession like we are right now, it's not easy to swing yourself out of it.
I think it's like, for me, it's just the most benefit I can get from whoever party it is. So I'm paying attention on how it affects me directly. Who's going to put money back into my pocket as far as to make it more affordable.
And finally, it will be interesting to hear what the vice president has to say about border security and immigration. You played the ad a moment ago that's new here in Arizona, also in Nevada, but it's really a topic that Democrats have struggled to gain traction on. So as it is important here in these border states, it'll be interesting to see how the vice president addresses those issues. We know the White House put out a memo earlier today that talked about executive action that President Biden took with Vice President Harris at his side on those topics. So we'll be interested to see what she says this afternoon here in Arizona and how it resonates with the crowd that's going to be listening. Brian?
All right, Aaron, thank you for that. And joining me now from the White House is NBC's Monica Alba, and Vaughn Hillyard is in Bozeman, Montana, where Trump will rally later today. So, Monica, Aaron just took us through what to expect from Arizona, but you also have some reporting on Harris's plans after these swing states. In fact, her and President Biden will hold an event together in Maryland. What more do we know about that?
Yeah, an official event, Ryan. So they're going to be appearing together in their capacity as the president and vice president of the United States. But certainly anything that they're doing right now takes on a real political overtone as well. They're going to be focusing, we're told, on lowering costs for Americans. This is something that both of them throughout the course of the administration have tried to focus as a real agenda item and priority, but they're going to be heading to Maryland to speak about that specifically. And it's going to come at an interesting time because we know that next week, as the vice president is getting ready for the Democratic National Convention, she's going to start laying out a couple of policy proposals that may differ a bit from President Biden's. And this is a space in an area where those close to the vice president say she knows that she needs to put her sort of own stamp on where she views certain things while respectfully walking a line of saying that she thinks President Biden and that their administration has done a decent amount of work in some areas, but that more could be done. So we expect to start to see that kind of roll out, but it'll be interesting to see the two of them together since they have been together at that most notably prisoner exchange return of the Americans at Joint Base Andrews last week, but we haven't really seen them in an event like this. So it will be notable for several reasons, of course.
It does beg the question, though, Monica, will we see the president, President Biden, out on the campaign trail? How is the Harris campaign planning to utilize the president as this race continues?
And they're navigating this delicately, as you can imagine, Ryan, because it's only been less than 3 weeks since President Biden exited the 2024 race. But in that time, the energy, the enthusiasm that Democrats have seen for Vice President Harris, they want to keep that momentum going. And they know that President Biden returning to the campaign trail raises more questions about his decision to leave and his decision now about the path forward and all of that. So I think they're going to have a role for him to play. He has said that he wants to be helpful ahead of the election, but I think it is going to be something that's a bit more limited and tailored to where they think he can be helpful on that messaging. One other area likely where we're going to see the president try to do what he can is maybe with some fundraising, and that's something that they can use as a tool in the months ahead as well.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Let's go to Vaughn now, who is in Montana, where Trump's first campaign appearance will be this week. It's not a swing state, as you know, Vaughn. It does have a very important Senate race there. But what does this tell us about the Trump campaign strategy that they would dedicate the candidate's precious time, the most valuable resource, on an event that's really probably more focused on winning back the Senate than winning the White House?
Right. I know this is wild. This is crazy. But there is a little bit of time till Election Day. Early voting doesn't begin in some key states like Minnesota and Virginia until September 20th. And so we're still a month and a half away. And I would anticipate that the Trump campaign would ramp up the amount of time that it is spending in the actual battleground states. And this week, you saw him last weekend in Georgia, and then you saw him this week holding down at his Mar-a-Lago estate. But coming here to Montana, because also important to pushing the Trump agenda if he were to win the White House, Ryan would, of course, as you are all too familiar with, is understanding that Republican majorities in the U.S. House and the Senate are going to be absolutely crucial. And that's where Tim Sheehy is the Republican candidate here, who is running to take down incumbent Senator Jon Tester. And for Republicans, if they win the White House, and you have J.D. Vance, who would be the president of the Senate, could be the tie-breaking vote. All they would need to do is flip one seat, and that likely would be the state of West Virginia, where Senator Joe Manchin is retiring, and they believe Republican Governor Jim Justice, who is running to take his seat, is in a good position to win. But they would like to get at least one more seat, and Montana is a good place to go looking, because, you know, it was back in 2020, there was another close Senate race where it was the popular Democratic Governor Steve Bullock who ran here, but lost by 10 percentage points to now Republican Senator Steve Daines. So Republicans think that they have a good shot here against Jon Tester, who 6 years ago, we should note, did win this race by 4 percentage points. So that is why you are seeing Donald Trump here in Montana tonight.
But it is curious that this is how he chooses to spend his time, especially because he's just hasn't been on the campaign trail that much. He seemed to bristle at that question during the press conference yesterday when it was suggested to him that he hasn't been out there that much. Is he going to really start to ramp things up, or is the campaign just going to leave everything on J.D. Vance's shoulders when it comes to getting out there and actually meeting with voters?
Right, Ryan. There is nothing on the public schedule as of right now. No campaign events that we are aware of. He's doing a couple fundraisers here in Montana and down in Wyoming over the next 24 hours. But the question is, when does he really pick up that schedule? It has been very light since he announced his presidential bid in November of 2022. And I'll note that there was some criticism or questioning of his schedule earlier this year when he was running against Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and others in the Republican primary. And, you know, in the month leading up to the Iowa caucus, he only had 5 days in the state of Iowa on the campaign trail, yet he went and ran away with it. Of course, the juxtaposition of this race against a rising Kamala Harris, it's very, very different. And I would anticipate that you would see some of that money being spent and some of the time spent towards hitting the campaign trail. But as of right now, I think that is an open question mark that only Donald Trump and his team are going to be able to answer, right?
Okay, Vaughn Hillyard, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. Let's talk more about this now with Amy Walter, who is the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report. Amy, always great to talk to you, especially given the fact that this may have been the craziest month in politics that we've seen in some time, and that's saying something. But it does look like the race is reset to where it was earlier in the summer. It's pretty remarkable to think about everything that we've been through over the past couple of weeks, and then we're basically right back to where we started. What do you make of this lack of movement in the polls?
Well, I'd actually argue, Brian, there's been a great deal of movement. It just has been more of a seesaw, perhaps, is the way to think about it. So on the one hand, it is true, Kamala Harris has made up a lot of ground, that she's narrowed the gap between herself and Donald Trump. That was quite large or was much larger when Biden was in the race. So if you look just at the national polling, where Harris is right now, somewhere around a point or so ahead of Trump, maybe a little bit more than that in the national polls. That's a 5-point shift from where things were just a month ago. And as you know, Ryan, in a political world that we live in these days, which is so polarized and so calcified around partisanship, 5 points is about as big of a movement as you could get. And 5 points can be the difference between winning and losing the presidency. At the same time, Donald Trump is in a better position than he was back at this point in 2020. Back at this point, he was down by 6 points in the national polls and trailing in every single one of those battleground states. So I think what we have, instead of saying we're sort of back to normal, we really, I think you put it this way, it's a reset. And essentially we're back to, if you think about this in sports terms, these are two very well-matched football teams. For the last few months, it's the red team, the Trump team, that's been on the field. All of their team has been on the field, ready to go. The blue team has not. A lot of their members have been on, a lot of their players have been on the sidelines. Now, the burst of enthusiasm that Harris has brought to Democrats means that all of the Democratic squad is on the field. So now we're back to a place where this is going to be a game of inches, where these two very well-matched teams are fighting for those last couple of yards into the end zone.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the reset, and I think a lot of heads turned when your organization moved a number of these swing states out of the toss-up category and put them in the lean Republican category. You've now moved some of them back. The presidential races in Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada are now, once lean Republican, are now toss-up. Talk to me about the thinking behind that decision.
Sure. So back in early July, when we moved those into leaning Republican, Trump's lead in those states ranged from 5 to almost 7 points. A state like Georgia, a state that, as we know, Biden narrowly carried by about 10,000 votes, Trump was up by over 6 points. That is obviously a very difficult margin to make up as a candidate, especially if you're the incumbent candidate. You're very well known and already well defined. The fact that polls now have Georgia either tied or Trump is maybe up 1 or 2 points says this race is sort of reset. We're back to a 50-50 race. And we're seeing the same thing in Arizona and Nevada. What's happening is a lot of those voters who were parking themselves, maybe they were in third party, like they said they were supporting RFK Jr., or they said they didn't think they were going to vote, didn't know they were going to vote. They were undecided. Those folks have now moved over to Harris.
All right, let's talk about the issues, and one issue in particular that could potentially play a big role in this election. And former President Trump got some attention for his claim that abortion isn't going to be a factor. That's his take. Listen to what he said yesterday.
I think the abortion issue has been very much tempered down. And I've answered, I think, very well in the debate, and it seems to be much less of an issue. I think the abortion issue has been taken down many notches. I don't think it's a big factor anymore, really.
Says it's not a big factor. It's going to be on the ballot in 6 states. Six states already have measures to expand this on the ballot. Is this wishful thinking on Trump's part?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, listen, he does have something of an advantage in that he's not tied as closely to some of the positions that, say, other Republicans who've lost in the last cycle since the Dobbs decision have been. So some of those were folks running for the Senate or Congress who said things like there are no exceptions allowed. They've been on the record, having a voting record that was much more conservative on abortion. But remember, what Democrats do have now in Kamala Harris is somebody who can excite the base that was excited about abortion, but not particularly excited about Biden. I think she helps to re-energize those voters. The other is J.D. Vance, and his positions on abortion make things more complicated for Trump. Now, obviously, Trump is the principal. He's the one who gets to say this is the position that the White House, that the administration is taking. But it's harder for him, I think, to distance himself from those issues when we keep hearing about positions that J.D. Vance has either taken or things that he has said in the past about the issue.
Okay, Amy, it's going to be a fun couple of weeks here as we head into the sprint to the election day. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.